Hello, my name is Muthoni. Welcome to another episode of Just Doing Life, the podcast, a space where we explore all the parts of life that we do not like to say out loud. After all, we are all just winging it. Welcome to another episode of Options. We are doing this because we got options. I feel like we say options differently every single time. And who are we not to? Okay, that's how we be doing things. Options is a weekly series of Just Doing Life, the podcast that drops every single Friday. And we talk about the things that I have learned through life, life experiences, and all those things. I just share my insights. Just, it's something for you don't have to learn from your own experiences. You can learn from mine because I have made enough mistakes in this life. So I have a wealth of mistakes that you can learn from. Today, we will be talking about abandoning yourself in relationships, or what is considered self-abandonment. It's also like it's a term. But before we get into that, you know what I have to ask you. You know what I'm about to ask. Did you do your homework? How is your flower? How is your flower doing, or your bouquet, or how are the flowers doing? I am so excited to find out how they're doing because of that nurturing part of it, where you actually take care of it and talk to it like it's an extension of you. If you are listening to the audio version, please go to the website or go to our social media page. We have a highlight on how the process was. You can check out my flowers over here. This is all they've been doing. I've been documenting from day one, and I was documenting live on Instagram from day one through to where we are now. So this is how the bouquet is looking. Tell me how yours is looking. Check it out on Instagram. We have our page. Check it out on the website if you'd prefer that as well. Instagram is at JDL the podcast. The website is muthonigitao.com. I am Muthoni Gitao is my personal page, but I'm very excited that that was the exercise that we chose to do that day. It sounds so stupid. Just buy yourself flowers. And also, I feel flowers are one really good way of showing yourself love or showing people love, because flowers they don't have a meaning. It's just like they just make someone happy. When you receive flowers, for me, I know every single time I've given someone flowers, or I've gifted someone flowers, that look on their face is always like that, for like, oh, that's always the look. And even with men, I give flowers to men as well, FYI, because I know most men have never received flowers. So for me, one thing I do make sure I do is I do give the men in my life flowers as well. Such a beautiful moment. It's a beautiful feeling. It's always fun when they go like, oh my God. Or when they go like, this is my first time receiving flowers. This is, I don't know what to do. I've never had to do what do people do when they receive flowers. So it's always interesting. So that's the reason why I chose that particular exercise for last week. Please, in the comment section, let me know when did you do it, how did it go for you. The form should also be down there in the description. Yeah, we also have comments in the description box. There's a form if you want to answer anonymously and you don't want to leave your name details in the comment section. If you don't feel as brave as everyone else who's like, yeah, maybe I'm a silent follower, it's okay. Silence, you can still send in your thoughts on that. Let's get into today's episode, abandoning yourself. Oh my Lord. Jesus. We'll start by talking about what does abandon even mean. Abandon basically just means you cease to support or look after. That's what it means. Or you completely give up on something, someone. In this case, when we say yourself, it's on yourself. So you cease to support or look after yourself, or you give up on yourself completely. This particular episode will be focusing specifically on relationships, and also, I don't know if this extends, but for me, my experience is unfortunately hetero relationships. So, um, yeah, that's my Nini is gonna be my take is I don't know if it's gonna extend, and I hope it does, but self-abandonment probably just presents the same way in multiple ways, because it can also present the same way with yourself, with relationships with family, relationships with friends as well, because some of those things they just pop up in different ways. So yeah, we've explained what abandoning blah blah means. First question I have, is it a girl thing? That's the first. Like, is it training? Are we trained to do this? Because I personally feel we are trained into abandoning ourselves from when we're very, very young. It starts off with in the household where
if you live in a household that has boys and you're a girl, the expectations are very different, boys versus girls. There are certain things that you're expected to sacrifice. And then it becomes even worse if say you're a firstborn versus a secondborn versus a lastborn versus an only child. As a firstborn, I would say, as a firstborn girly, I would say that the self abandonment starts pretty early. It starts the moment the secondborn is born. The first thing you're told is, yeah, you're no longer the priority. You're no longer the, like, you notice, and it's not even just like the things for when you notice a shift in the kind of attention you get, it's also in terms, I don't know about other people's households, but in our household, it got to a point where now I was expected to take care of my younger siblings as they were being born, because it was like, you have a bit more experience, you've been through this road before, so you're expected to fill in the gap for your parents and the adults in your life. So naturally, as a firstborn daughter, the self-abandoning process starts pretty early. I remember there's a time I used to brag that I started cooking when I was 7. But now I'm like, that's not a flex. As a 7-year-old, I had no business learning how to cook. Or even if I was doing it, I shouldn't have been cooking food for family members or for like the family. It should have been the kalongolongo type. You know, those ones where you would steal makaa from here, you make those two tiny jikos using the cans, the blue band cans, and then you'd make a jiko, and then you're cooking like one piece of meat and then the rest of it. And it's a piece of nyama that you stole when your mother was cooking last night. That kind of cooking, totally allowed. But cooking for people in the house when there's adults in the house, taking care of other people. You see, I should have been outside playing, but what was I doing? No, I was learning to cook at 7. So I used to think it was a flex. I was like, oh, yeah, I learned to cook when and that's why I'm saying it's training. We're conditioned from a very young age because I was brought up to believe that knowing how to cook at such a young age meant like I was very smart. I was very da da da. You know, it's like, hey, you've achieved something. Yay, good for you. My cousins who were boys, because I grew up around my cousins. We were a mix of the girls and the boys. And I noticed like the expectations on the girls, especially because we also had older cousins who were girls. We saw the expectations. Those ones for funny. Okay. A great example. When I was a teenager, I used to, when I would wash my uniform over the weekend, I wouldn't just wash mine. I'd wash my uniform, my sister's uniform, my brother's uniform, and my home clothes. And then when I finished high school and I was at home as a quote unquote adult, we were talking about adulting last week. Go check out that episode because adulting is a scam. But yeah, I ranted about it. An entire episode of me just ranting about adulting. Check it out. When I became a quote unquote adult at 18, because me, I think maybe I became an adult the other day when I turned 30, but again, story for another day. When I would do the cleaning, when I would wash the clothes, clean the house, it was always for everyone in the house. So when you're cleaning everything that's dirty. But with like my brother, as much as he was cleaning, my brother could just clean his uniform and it was okay. And I even remember at one point having a conversation with my mom where she pointed out that I have two brothers. So our third born and fourth born are boys and they're about 10 years apart. So my mom was complaining that my brother would only wash his clothes and wouldn't wash my brother's clothes. So I was like, me, when I was in the house, I used to wash everyone's clothes. And even my sister, after I left and it was my sister, it was the same thing. She would wash everyone's clothes. And then now here comes my brother. And my brother is like, kila mtu abebe mzigo wake, tafadhali. Mimi sikuvaa hizo nguo, so sizioshi. And it's quite interesting because there was no pushback on that. Another thing, there's a time my brother was visiting me and he would do this thing where he'd literally cook. I'm out all day doing work, blah blah. I come back home and he's cooked for one himself. He knows I'm coming back home. He definitely knows I didn't eat out there because I hardly eat, but he's still just gonna cook for himself. But as me, or being a lady, being a woman, being a girl, the thought of always making sure that everyone has food would pop into my head. If I'm cooking, I'd be like, cool, cook for everyone. When I'm deciding on what I eat, call and confirm, hey, are you comfortable eating ABC? I come with it. And then he'd be like, met and lisha pika, blah, blah. And you're just like, oh, okay. So it's quite interesting. So I do think it goes back to conditioning and training, and it starts from a very young age. And that is why I feel like even in relationships as adults, women self abandon way more than men. I've hardly ever met men who self abandon because to center themselves, men know how to always leave things that are not working for them, just walk away, just say no, just reinforce their boundaries. And this is something that they learn from a very young age as well, because like they probably watch their brothers, their fathers saying no and just asserting dominance and being assertive and confident, and that's okayed. But as women, when you're younger and you say no, it's like, hey, umekuwa nani siku hizi, wewe ndo unatuongelesha? You know, it's frowned upon because women are not trained to be assertive. Women are not brought up with the idea that confidence is a good thing. It's always frowned upon. Even the ones who you see who are confident, who are assertive, you notice the words that are used to define them. Even think about something like the movie industry, the film industry, Hollywood. When people say, oh, that woman is a diva, don't work with her, and then you ask, what did she do? And then you're told she just said no to the director when the director wanted her to do something. And then it's something maybe as like, oh, and you guys are acting, I want you to kiss this guy. And she says, no, I'm not comfortable with that. And it's like, that diva. It's insane. It just words. Yeah. So I think it comes from training? Absolutely. I think it starts off from when we're very, very young. What does self-abandoning look like? In case you are not aware, I think I've mentioned bits of it, but it's, for instance, one of the ways I think self-abandonment shows up is when you either keep quiet or just do something for the sake of keeping the peace. So this is in, say, in a relationship. So maybe this person wrongs you, your partner wrongs you, and for the sake of keeping the peace, you don't have that conversation. You deal with the things na uko evo, when you try to have the conversation, it's not happening. So you just go like, I'll just stay silent to keep the peace instead of tushinde tukizozana. I don't see the point of arguing or going back and forth. I'll be quiet. Another way it shows is when you start suppressing your own desires. One of the ways that I noticed I was suppressing my desires was I didn't notice it in the moment. I noticed when I was out of it. It's also funny because sometimes you notice things once you're out of that space. It was that I had stopped going for events or certain types of events. I am a concert lover. I love live music. And that's something I used to do a lot because also I was in the creative space. I know a lot of artists. So whenever people would have a show, I'd be like, yeah, I'm going there to support this artist because I know them, or I'm going there to support that artist because I know them. And then when you end up, say, with someone who is not so into that kind of stuff, where they're like, yeah, I'm a homebody, I'd rather be at home all weekend doing nothing, then you slowly start not showing up. Or if you show up with them and then like 2 hours in and this person's like, yeah, I'm bored, let's go home. And you're like, the artist even wanted to watch performers and arrived. But because self-abandonment is a thing, you go like, okay, cool, yeah, we can definitely, I don't want you to stay in a place where you're not comfortable. We can definitely leave. And at the back of your mind, you're like, crap, I didn't get to see so and so perform. I don't get to see this person perform. I was really coming to see this person perform, and now I didn't get to see it. So that's one of the ways like self-abandonment shows up. Um, another way is when you end up disrespecting your own boundaries. So maybe you've put up some boundaries and you said, um, this and this is not acceptable for me. And then it happens, but then you go like, okay, silly happen, right? So that's one of the other ways that self abandonment shows up in your life. Another way is abandoning your, or no, not abandoning, you don't enjoy your hobbies anymore, where like you've sort of stopped doing things that bring you excitement, that bring you joy. That's a form of self abandonment as well. Because it could, especially if you're doing it because of the person you're partnered with, where it's either they don't like it or they say, for instance, say you are someone who learns to love how to play random instruments, and then this person goes like, yeah, they make very weird sounds, and then now suddenly you no longer practice that or do that in the house because it makes weird sounds, and you're like, okay. So that's another way that self-abandonment shows up. Spending less time with friends or people you love and family, that's a form, especially if you feel like it will be questions will be around the person, blah blah. But if you find yourself spending a lot less time, especially with family and friends that you used to be very close with, it's a form of self-abandonment, because basically you start pulling away from things that bring you joy, things that bring you laughter, the things that you enjoy, and that includes your friends and family. Another way is when you find yourself compromising on your own needs. Yo, the number of times I could write a book where there's certain needs that you have and they're not being met. And so you just go like, ni sawa tu. Yo, let me tell you, if there's something that can easily kill a relationship, it is that, where you are constantly compromising on your own needs. Because then eventually you abandon all, or you leave out all the things that you need, or you're no longer satisfied, you're no longer happy, you're no longer, like, you don't get your needs met. So it's like, what's the point of this thing anyway? And you just start realizing pole pole. It's like, so what am I doing here? My needs are not being met, my boundaries are not being respected. Um, hmm. Sometimes it does take a while to get to that point, but that's an important thing to clock. If you start noticing such things, that means you are self-abandoning, okay? Another way that self-abandonment shows up is when you find yourself consulting, even like consulting your partner in your relationship, even on the smallest of things. Consulting is not bad. Sometimes it could be like, yeah, we're getting things that blah blah. But then, for instance, say you are buying something and you know you definitely want it in purple, and then you're like, Aki, is it okay if I get it in purple? Please say it's okay that I get it in purple. That means, like, if they say get it in blue and you end up getting it in blue, you really wanted it in purple, but now you have it in blue. Why? Because they said, no, let's just do blue. When you find the smallest of things, such tiny things that you don't necessarily have to consult about, you can say, oh, by the way, I saw this thing and I like it and I'm getting it. Oh, and I think the purple one looks really nice and that's the one I'm getting. That's completely different. But that whole thing is like, you want one thing and then you ask them and then you're there hoping that you get it. And then they say something different. And so you end up going in that direction instead. That means you also don't speak up for yourself. That's another way of self-abandoning. You don't speak up for yourself. You don't show up for yourself in ways where you should. And then again, it goes back to that thing for, I'm just keeping the peace, so we'll just let it be. Making excuses for their bad behavior. This is like the biggest one. When they do things, they say things, and then excuse it. You say, it's just a mistake, but it's not the first time it's happened, and then it keeps happening, and then you just go like, nah, they just do that because they care. They're not controlling. They just do that because they love me. And it's something where everyone, maybe like it's with your friends, or say you've gone out with the girls and then they're constantly calling, and your friends are like, kwani, what's happening? And you start making excuses for them and say, nah, it's just because they've missed me. Oh my god, it's just because they've missed me. It's just because they care. It's just because they love me. And maybe it's a controlling thing. When you find yourself making excuses for their bad behavior, it's probably because you're self-abandoning. Okay, it's important to understand where these things come from. I've mentioned the childhood thing, which I think is a big, big factor. So things like childhood trauma can end up causing you to self-abandon. You find yourself having like people-pleasing tendencies. So I think it's important to understand where it stems from, because it's easier if you're trying to unlearn something or change something. It's always easier to deal with a problem when you know where it stems from, because then you attack or work on the root cause as opposed to the symptoms. In this case, the symptom being the way these things end up showing up. So the symptom would be the spending less time with your friends and close family, or not standing up for yourself. That's a symptom. So when you go back down and find what causes it, what is the root cause, then maybe you can start working on it from back there. That way you go like, oh, the reason I do ABC is because I don't think I felt validated as a child, and so I seek validation here. And so like I don't think I believe I'm loved, and blah blah blah. And then you get to that point. So what are some of the questions you should ask yourself? If you're trying to figure out how to, one, unlearn, and two, deal with self-abandonment, right? I think some of the most important questions to ask, do you feel deserving of love? The funny thing is, your instinct to this question is to answer yes. The first instinct is like, yeah, hey, me, I love myself. But when you sit with a question, do I feel I am deserving of love? And sometimes you can even pay attention to the way you react towards love, whether it's love that's given to you, when you witness love, when you see love. You might realize that you actually don't think you're deserving of love, or you don't think you're deserving of a certain type of love. You'll see like certain people doing certain things for their partners and their friends, and you're like, oh my God, I wish that I was deserving. And you might not use the word deserving, where you go like, some of us will never get that. Right? So sometimes you don't use the words of, oh, I don't think I'm deserving of that kind of love. No, sometimes that's not how you say it. Sometimes how you say it is, eh, those are the lucky ones. The chosen few get to experience that, which means you don't think you're part of the chosen few. Another question you need to ask yourself: how do you give and receive love? Sometimes the way you give and receive love are very different. The way you give love might be very different, and the way you receive it might be very different. For me, one of the ways I give love is I gift people things. So for someone who is not, who doesn't receive love in terms of receiving gifts, they don't see receiving gifts as a form of love. They might not feel loved like that. Another way I give love is like I love to affirm people, right? I love to tell people you're doing great. And then if someone that's not if to someone that's not how they receive love, they might not clock that as love, right? They might not clock it as I'm loved. So it's important to know how you receive and how you give love. So that once you know how you receive love, if someone is doing like so the way I'm saying, like the way I give love. So if they're giving the way they give love is not the way you receive love, you can have that conversation and say, oh, I know this is how you give love, but that's not how I receive love. This is how I receive love. So it's very important to know these two things. That way you can clock when things are happening and you're like, I don't feel loved. And then it's like, is it that they don't love you? Is it that they're showing, or is it that they're showing you love in a way that you don't receive it? That's not your way of receiving love. Okay. Are you allowing others to treat you a certain way? The reason I included this particular question was there was this conversation that was happening on Twitter, and it was around nothing where I say people treat you the way you allow, like they if you put up boundaries and you say don't call me past 10 p.m., people who respect boundaries would not call you past 10 p.m. If you say, I don't shout at me when we're talking, and then you allow it one time, because sometimes I do feel like people, okay, not sometimes, all the times, when you put up boundaries, people will test them. So whenever you put up a boundary, someone will definitely test it. And when people are testing boundaries, they want to see how much they can get away with. So you'll say something like, don't shout at me when you're talking to me. And the first time, they will raise their voice and you say, hey, don't do that. When they do it a second time, they're testing to see, is this like for real? Or like, can I get away with it? Another reason for this particular question is sometimes this behavior we don't accept from certain people, especially, and the best way to gauge this is people you don't like versus people you like. People you like, you allow them to get away with things, with so many things that you would naturally not allow people to get away with. Or people you love. Sometimes you're like, I love this person or I like this person, so I'm going to let it slide. And then you let it slide a second time, then a third time, then a fourth time. And now it's just become a habit. It's a behavior that now is just a part of whatever relationship you guys have. So you have to ask yourself, are you allowing people to treat you a certain way? And the follow-up question is, would you allow this with anyone else? So in the context of a relationship, if it's the shouting, if it's the maybe talking back or saying mean things to you, do you allow them to say those things to you because you're like, but I love them? And when it comes to someone else, you're like, oh, how dare you talk to me? Like you actually stand your ground and you show up for yourself. So those two questions go hand in hand. The next question that I'd say is very, very important, and this one I would say make sure you write it down, is what are your fears if you said no or yes, or if you asserted your boundaries? So most people are afraid to say no. No is the one thing that I know people usually are scared to say. If you find yourself afraid to say no to someone in particular because you're in a relationship with them or some type of relationship with them, you should ask yourself, what is the fear that you have that if you say no, ABC will happen? So if say they ask you to do something and you really want to say no, but you end up saying yes, which is self-abandoning, what's the fear of saying no? If I say no, my fear is one, two, three things will happen. They will not like me anymore. They'll stop talking to me. They won't text me as much as I want. What is the fear? Write that down. And then now you know you're based on where to start. The reason you self abandon is because that's the thing you're scared of. You're scared they will leave you. You're scared they won't talk to you. You're scared they won't like you. Why? Do they only like you because you say yes? That's another question to ask. Or do they like you because you're just you? Okay. The final question here you have to ask yourself is, are you trying to convince them or yourself or both of you that you are deserving of love? Sometimes when it comes to the self-abandoning practices or the things in terms of self-abandoning, the things that we do when we're self-abandoning, it's because you're trying to convince the other person that you're deserving. So you let go of your things. If one day they say, me, I don't like it when people wear short skirts. Now suddenly I'm only wearing maxi skirts and maxi dresses because I'm trying to convince them that I'm worthy of them loving me, because at least I'm not one of the girls they don't like. I'm not one of them who wear the skirts. I'm not the ones who show their shoulder things or their bra straps or whatever, like whatever it is. Oh, I don't like it when girls wear makeup. And now you're someone who loves makeup. And now suddenly you're like, oh, yeah, I'll just tone it down because I want to be liked. I want them to like me. So are you trying to convince them or yourself that you are deserving of that love? Ask yourself that question. And if you're trying to convince them, chances are you're also trying to convince yourself, because that means you're expecting someone else to dictate what version of you deserves love. When they say, um, I prefer you. Okay, prefer is not even the word. When they say, I like it when you don't, I like you more when you're not wearing makeup. And then now everywhere I show up, I don't have makeup. I don't have makeup. But me, I'm a makeup girly. I love my makeup. So I'm also trying to convince myself in this situation that, oh yeah, maybe I'm not a makeup girly because he said I'm not a makeup girly and that's what he prefers. And I want him to like me and I like him. So I can't be a makeup girly. Okay? When you catch yourself self-abandoning, what are some of the things that you can do? Or if I've called you out, I feel like this is a calling out type episode. Don't worry, I'm also calling myself out, okay? There are certain things, like whenever I prep for these things, there are certain things I say, Muthoni, unakumbuka a certain person that you are allowing to treat you a certain, and you're like, never again. Or, so anyway, what can you do when you find yourself, when you catch yourself, and you realize, oh, I've really been self-abandoning? What can I do? One, you have to know what your non-negotiables are and what your boundaries are. Better yet, write them down. Have a list. Have a list of, I will not tolerate this. These are my boundaries and these are my non-negotiables. So when you already have a set list, it's like when you have a checklist, right? And immediately they're like, oh, they're already testing the boundaries. You're like, yeah, no thanks. Or that's where you assert your boundaries and say, nope, that's actually not something I'm comfortable with. And so we will not be doing that. I will not allow you to speak to me this way. I do not allow people to be unkind to me, and you've been unkind to me. Or I don't, for me, you can even be like, I don't associate with people who use unkind words when they refer to me. And because of that, I will not be talking to you anymore. And sometimes you don't even have to tell them. You can be like, yeah, because it depends with, I guess, the stage of the relationship that you're in. You can easily go like, we are Lintukana. I know they used this name thinking, or they said it was a joke, but it wasn't funny. So I will not be moving further with this person. I will not be continuing this conversation. I will not be continuing to talk to this person, or I will not be continuing with this particular relationship because my boundaries are not like they're being overstepped. You're overstepping the boundaries, and my non-negotiables are suddenly you think my non-negotiables are negotiable. They're not. Another thing you can do is you can exercise saying no, and it can start with small things. We have a fear of saying no, and the fear of saying no, I think, also goes hand in hand with the fear of being perceived. You're afraid of being perceived as rude, being perceived as someone who does not do what everyone else is comfortable doing. And sometimes it's simple. It doesn't even have to be within that context. It can be as simple as, you see na matatu when they go like, oh, unaweza kaa excess, when they're trying to carry an excess passenger, and you guys like, no, I'll just wait for the next one. It's okay. It's not the last matatu in the world. You exercise saying no in different ways, because then it's going to be easier, even in your relationship, to say no to things that you're not comfortable doing or that you don't want to do. So exercise no's in different locations, different places, different friendships, different people, where if someone is saying, oh, I want to sell you these socks, you can just say, no, I'm good. Thank you. Simple, respectful. And then you keep it pushing. And then the next time there's and then another one, and it's going to be easier. Clear communication when it comes to your boundaries is very, very important. Any relationship you're in, be it friendship, family, even with like whatever kind of relationships you have, boundaries are very important. And communicating your boundaries is also very, very important. I believe I have become really, really good at communicating my boundaries these days. Yay, adulting 101. I've become better. I feel like I used to know how to say no, and I used to know how to communicate these things. But then I would also have this thing like, when you have like a soft spot for someone, and then you just like that thing I said, you just let it slide once and then it happens a second time. You have to be able to communicate your boundaries very clearly. That way, hakuna that thing for, oh, I thought it was a suggestion. No, it was not. I was very clear about what this was, and I communicated that, and you decided to disrespect it, and therefore, no thanks. Having a supportive group of friends or a group of people around you, be it friends or family, is also very important when you notice yourself abandoning, because you can share with them, and you can be like, yeah, this is one of the ways that I noticed that I self-abandon, and so I'll not be doing that anymore. Sometimes I find it hard to say no to you when you ask me. Again, it goes back to all these things go hand in hand. And when they're supportive and you say no to them, they won't catch feelings. They won't feel like it's a personal attack. It's like, oh my God, now we're no longer friends because I asked, and you said, I asked you to come with me to this concert, and you said you would rather sleep. Oh, da, da. No, because they're supportive. They'll be like, oh, I get that. That's cool. Because even them, if they're not self-abandoning, they'll be like, oh yeah, I totally understand why you would choose to do that instead. Do you? Do what works for you. That's what you want to do. You shouldn't have to give up the things that you want to do just because someone else wants to do something different. Okay? Practicing self-care is also very, very important, because all these things, it's about you're taking care of yourself. Remember, abandoning was when we talked about abandoning, is like you give up completely, right? Abandonment. So you've given up on yourself, which means you don't even take care of yourself anymore. You don't do things for yourself anymore because you're constantly doing things for other people. You're trying to please other people. So self-care is putting yourself first. Because for me, one of the reasons I think self-care is very important is, if you don't give to yourself and you don't surround yourself with people who are also giving, when you're giving, where do you think all that comes from? You're just depleting and depleting and depleting the resource that you have, because you don't replenish it by surrounding yourself with people who are also givers, which goes back to a supportive system as well. And then you're also not giving to yourself, and you're not taking care of yourself. When you take care of yourself, it makes it easier to take care of others and be there for others. So take care of yourself and practice self-care. It's very, very important. The last thing I'll say here is be what you wish others would be for you. This goes back to like episode 1, the exercise we did in episode 1, which is actually going to be today's homework. We'll go back to episode 1's exercise. There's an importance in being to yourself the things you wish others were to you. If you wish people were kinder to you, be kind to yourself. If you wish people loved you more, love yourself a little bit more. If you wish people gifted you, gift yourself stuff. If you wish people took you out, take yourself out. So for me, I feel like whenever we have these wishes where you hope or you wish that someone would do something for you, it's because you desire the thing. So if you desire a nice dinner in a nice restaurant, don't wait around until someone somewhere decides that you're worthy of being taken out. Wake up and decide that I'm worthy of taking myself out to a nice dinner. I am deserving of a beautiful dinner in a beautiful garden in a beautiful restaurant, and I'm going to go do that for myself. So for me, I think that's one of the ways, because then you're not expecting things from the outside because you can do them for yourself, and you're not worried, or you don't feel some type of way doing it for yourself. So that what that does is you get to experience all the things you want to experience without waiting for someone to come give you that experience. That way, if someone comes into your life and they want to give you this experience, it's just but a bonus. But you're not sitting there waiting and hoping that one day a charming whatnot person will come and take you out for dinner on this to this beautiful restaurant that you've been passing. Na kila school, when you pass there, you're curious about it. You're like, I want to check out this place. I'd love to come here with someone. No, take yourself. You're someone. You, yourself, and you. There's 3 of you already. You're fine. Me, myself, and I. We can go eat dinner. Okay? So, homework. Homework o'clock. I said this week's homework is going back to episode 1. In episode 1, we wrote a list of 5 things. We wrote a list of 5 things that you wish that someone would do for you. Something about love, right? The way you receive love. We had a list of 5 things, and we did one thing that first week. So I want you to go back to that list and choose another thing, and that's what you're going to do this week. And then you're going to come back here and you're going to tell me how it went in the comment section, and I'll be looking forward to hearing from you. And then again, we added a form, so if you want to do that anonymously and say, oh my God, I did this for myself and I loved it. Also, when we share these things, we give each other ideas, because mine might be limited to like just the things that I enjoy, but then someone else might post something and I'd be like, oh, that sounds interesting. I want to try that. So go back to your list of all the things, the way you want to receive love, because the list was about the ways you would love to receive love, and then you did one in episode 1. So now you get to pick another one and do that in this particular episode. Yay! Look at you loving yourself the way people don't want to love you, but the way you need to receive love. Yay! I love that for you. Thank you for being a part of this particular episode. Thank you for sitting through this. This is options. I don't know how to say options. I feel like I say it differently every single time. And I feel like I also said that in the last episode, right? But we've got options because we got options. Yay! And the option is to always love yourself first. Thank you for listening to this episode. Remember, you can follow us on social media at Just Doing Life the podcast. That's a lie. It's at JDL the podcast. I'm always lying on this podcast when it comes to our social media handles. Okay, I'm gonna be better at this, I promise. JDL the podcast on TikTok and Instagram. Hashtag JDL the podcast on Twitter or X, if that's what you call it. And I am Muthoni on all platforms. I'd love to see you back here next week for another amazing episode. Thank you for spending your time with us. And remember, Just Doing Life a Little is up on Monday. So I'll see you on Monday with that particular episode. Have yourself a lovely, lovely weekend full of love.